Well, hey guys, and welcome back to the Hillside. Obviously, we are indoors today. It is December. It is cold. We had some snow outside. You can kind of see over here in the flower beds a little bit. It's kind of melted off, but I'd like to do a little houseplant tour just because when you can't be outside, you need to have something growing on the inside to keep you sane. At least in my opinion, you do, because if not, it's a long time to go without growing plants. So without babbling on anymore, let me go ahead and show you what I have going in just my dining room window. Now this is a due south facing window. It gets plenty of sunlight, which is very critical for growing indoor plants, especially those that require a high amount of light. So that being said, starting over here, this is just a hibiscus. As you can see, it actually does have some blooms. It's trying to put out, but it's doing okay. It's dropping a couple of bit of leaves when you brought it inside, just to kind of get adjusted to the light and things like that, the temperature levels, humidity, etc., etc. And speaking of humidity, before I forget, I got one of these little things here. It's just it's a cactus water, maybe, I don't know, but anyhow, you put water inside. It's just plugged in with like a little USB cord, and if you can see the water coming out, little water vapor, that's going to help your plants out right there, just by adding a little bit of humidity to the surrounding area to keep the plants just a little bit more, because you don't realize how dry your houses are, especially in the wintertime with the heat running and things like that. Central air, it's going to get really dry, and that could actually have more damaging effect on your plants than you might expect, unless of course you're growing strictly like a cactus or something like that. I guess that would be a benefit to having a dry climate, because they would not do well in a moist or damp environment as well. So what you see here, this little Charlie Brown looking Christmas tree here, this is actually a moringa, and I think it's going dormant. It's put out a couple new leaves every now and then it just they die off. So it needs to just go to sleep, in my opinion. I've never grown moringa before. I know it's a tropical plant, so maybe it doesn't go dormant, but the stem seems fairly alive. It's not dying. So hopefully it just kind of takes a little nap and wakes up here in a few months and starts putting out more and more leaves and starts growing a little more on the height, because I don't know, I've considered making it more into it's just a decorative thing. I don't really know what I'm going to do with it. But I might let it go outside, just plant it out, let it grow one last season until the fall and winter comes and takes it out. But I don't know. It's not overly impressive to me as far as a plant, so it's not really a showpiece. It's more just an experiment. So anyways, this right here next to my humidifier is a bay laurel. Yes, the same plant that you use the bay leaves for cooking. I always talk about growing your own herbs and spices and as many ingredients as you can, and I use the bay leaves quite a bit in my cooking. So this guy's little tiny guy. It'll grow into a shrub or a bush in its native climate, I think in California, northern Mexico, places like that in the desert out that way. So obviously I can't really recreate that here, so it's going to be brought inside and kept small enough that I can actually still use the leaves off of it for cooking, but also to make it a little interesting little house plant, because I mean, if you're looking, zoom in on it, it's pretty cool. I mean, these leaves are super tough. They're like leathery, I guess is the way I'm trying to say. They're not like flimsy like you would on this hibiscus or something like that. They're actually extremely hard. So there's that. Now, speaking of desert plants, hopefully it's getting good light in this. This is a Joshua tree. Grew this from seed, and as you see down here, some of the older leaves kind of die off, which kind of gives it that trunk-like appearance. If you've seen Joshua trees out in nature, they'll have a big trunk with just the growth on top. And again, I can't plant this outside, it would die, but it's a kind of cool little house plant. Just word of caution, these spikes are extremely sharp, and in the course of watering, I always spike myself with these things. It seems to be another theme this year in the garden, always spiking myself on something. Anyhow, it's another long story. Let me get to this one here first. This is actually a bird of paradise. It is in a container, obviously, because once again, can't plant it outside. But I was at a hotel one time in South America, very long story, but they had these bird of paradise that were in blooming, and this is the most awesome fragrance ever. So I'm like, I have to get one of these, and that was years ago. So finally I saw one online. It was like $6 for a bulb or something like that, a little small plant. And this thing's probably doubled or tripled in size since I got it. It's a very slow grower, but you know, eventually, hopefully one day it will bloom. That would be so awesome. If you've never seen bird of paradise flowers, do check that out. They're pretty awesome. They're one of the most interesting looking flowers, at least in my opinion. Right here, this is actually two Joshua trees. I had one growing, and all of a sudden, just randomly, another one started. I guess the seed was just taking a long time for it to sprout. So two ended up growing side by side, and you can see the spikes on these things. Oop. just how long these things are here. And these things are absolutely deadly. I mean, these things are super sharp. So yeah, grow a Joshua tree for fun, but be very, very careful. Moving along over here, this is just a standard bromeliad. I believe it was an orange. Had the orange. It's not really a flower, but you know, the actual bromeliad the centers will change colors, the bracts, I think they're called. Anyhow, this one has not had a second coloring, if you will, but it's a very healthy plant. It's doing fine. It's in this little nice little container, terracotta looking thing. So it looks nice. It gives a little bit of offset to the texture, the waviness of it. So when you have your house plants as well, you don't want to get everything looking exactly the same. At least, you know, in my opinion, you know, you need some different variation in your plants to keep it interesting. You know, you don't want to have just a table of everything with smooth round leaves with red flowers. I mean, that'd be boring. So mix it up. Throw some random things in there. This one over here, you've seen this before. This is the Kalanchoe or Kalanchoe, however you want to pronounce it. And if you look close enough, right here, leaf in the way, sorry, right there on the end, on that end there, right here, and one right there. These are the flower buds. This thing is about to bloom. So another thing, people, when they grow these plants, they'll give them usually around Valentine's Day or Mother's Day or something like that for a holiday because they have pretty red flowers on them. So that's just a gift idea, I guess, you know, seasonal. Then people might throw them away. But Kalanchoes, these are really easy to grow. I water it just when it gets dry. You don't want to actually soak it because it can kill it that way. And actually, underwatering it actually does better for them than overwatering, if that makes any sense. But the reason why people cannot get these to bloom in their house is because they don't have enough light. So you put this plant in your office or, you know, your kitchen window or something just as a decoration, and maybe it's not getting enough light. You sit on your kitchen table or on a nightstand or something. It's not getting enough, not going to get enough light to cause it to bloom. So because this window is due south facing, it gets plenty of sunlight. Yeah, it's actually beginning the bloom process. And where I had it before, didn't have much, well, it had sunlight, but not nearly as much as it does here. And it just kind of sat there, it grew, it was happy, but it wasn't, you know, doing anything. As soon as I moved it to this window, within a certain amount of time, I don't know, a month or two, but it's also seasonal because this is the time of year that it was blooming when I got it. So a lot of factors worked into that, but the basic thing I'm trying to say here is make sure you give these things plenty of sunlight and don't water them too much, and they will bloom for you. And I'll show you some pictures of those when they do bloom. Of course, this little pencil cactus, it's kind of looking cool here. I like how this thing here, this little, see, it just kind of little stem puts out, then a little propeller looking thing at the end. Now I'm not sure, I guess maybe in nature that would kind of lean over and it would touch the ground, and maybe that's how it would start a new plant. I could be making that completely up, but I think it just looks cool how it's kind of like reaching out like an arm like that. Down here I got some just your standard aloe and my little dinosaur pot right there with another aloe. Looks like he's kind of munching on it a little bit. But anyways, those are just, they came from a really big plant. These are just little pups I broke off. They were really, really small when I planted them. And this is more just propagating them to get bigger. These are just seed stock, for lack of better words. They're not really, they're forever home, this little tiny dinosaur cup and this little starters right here. So that being said, bring it to the last one, and this little story I'll tell you. This little tree here, get a better light right here. Here we go. So this little tree, I saw it growing in my flower bed, and I'm not sure what it is because I planted so many things. And I think where I dumped some old flower pots out where I had some tree seeds that I tried to germinate and they never germinated. So I just, you know, used the potting soil, dumped it in the garden or something like that. And I saw when I was weeding the flower bed one day, this little tiny guy is probably 3 inches tall. So I felt sorry for it. So I put it into a cup, left it, you know, it grew and grew and grew. And then it just stopped. It went dormant for an entire year. Yeah. And all summer long, it was green and happy. It watered it, took care of it, didn't do anything. Didn't grow a single inch, not one new leaf all summer long. I bring it inside, you know, late October, whenever temperatures started getting cold for fall. And as soon as I bring it inside, this thing starts growing. And you can see right here, it's put off all this new growth, everything from right here on up in the last like 2 months. So I don't know what this thing's doing. That's why I'm kind of afraid to plant it outside. One, I don't know what species it is, what variety it is. It's too small. I've tried to grow so many different things and random things. I'm fairly certain it's going to be hardy to this climate, but until I get a better idea, I don't want to risk throwing it outside and watching it just melt, you know, and die in the first cold snow or something. But that being said, if the seasons on this thing are backwards, for some reason it thinks that it should grow in the wintertime. Well, that's not going to do good if it's outside, and it's actually, adapted to the climate. Will it try to grow in the wintertime and not in the summer? Will it die? Will it hurt itself? I don't know. But eventually I have to make a decision because this thing's going to get too big eventually, and we'll go from there. So let me show you just a couple more of these little houseplants over here, continuing on this houseplant tour. All right, so we're in the same room. And these are just more of your standard lower light level plants that most people can identify. These are just a snake plant, also called mother-in-law's tongue. They're very tough and durable. Again, don't water these too much. They'll be just fine. They do good in low light. And another thing for most of these houseplants, you guys maybe don't know, but in the springtime, after it's warm, because a lot of these are tropical and very tender, all these plants go outside. My house has no plants on the inside during the summertime, spring, even into the fall. These guys can be perfectly happy outside. Make sure you put it in the right climate. Don't put it in full sun if it's not used to it. Harden them off slowly. All right, so there's that. The only drawback is when you bring them from outside to inside, you could bring pests and insects. So you need to make sure you bring clean soil. Make sure you check for insects and things like that prior to bringing them on the inside of your home, because there'll be no predators to take them out. Long story short, the bad guys will win. So this is a interesting plant. It's called rattlesnake plant, and just the leaves on this are awesome. So I totally had to get this. Like, that is awesome. It does fine in this low light kitchen table area. But the coolest thing about this, if you flip the leaves over, check it out. These things are purple, right? And if you get really close, I'm not sure if it's going to show through on the purple leaves. Well, these little black lines, little black veins, it kind of like purple and black stripes with these leaves on the top. Really, really cool. It's slow growing. Probably doesn't get as much light as it needs to, but hardly ever fertilize these things. They do just fine. Over here is just your standard Christmas cactus, holiday cactus, whatever, Easter cactus. But I grew this. This was just a cutting. Actually, it's two different plants. If you look down there, I just stuck two. I was at my grandma's house a couple years ago for Thanksgiving, and I just pinched off a couple leaves from some of the ones I thought were cool. Like this white flower here is really, really cool. It's kind of faded out, but you can see that. It's like white with a little bit of pink on the inside. So this one's white, and I believe this one here is like a reddish color, maybe like a maroon color. But anyways, they do just fine as well inside your house. Again, don't overwater this one. It does just fine in a lower light environment, and of course is blooming right on time. So I'm going to show you one more thing, another new type of plant for the hillside that I've never grown before, that I'm pretty excited about trying out and seeing how this goes, because I can see this maybe turning into some kind of an addiction in the future. Okay, so we're under some grow lights here in my little grow light station here, and these are actually tropical pitcher plants. So they need high light, high temperature, and constant moisture. So the soil here is all sphagnum peat moss with standard commercial peat moss, and just a little bit of potting soil just to kind of balance it out, because these guys need highly acidic soil and they need a bog-like condition. So they need pretty much standing water at all times. So that's why it's very important that this tray currently doesn't have water in it, but I fill it up about every other day, and this soil is pretty damp. It always stays pretty wet. If you can see right here in the back, little baby Venus flytraps. So they're just little guys. Kind of got these on a whim. They were next to these pitcher plants. I went for the pitcher plants, came back with Venus flytraps as well. You know how this goes, plant people. But anyways, it's doing healthy. It's putting off new little traps are coming out, so it's doing just fine. And I'm kind of intrigued right here because the peat moss, or the sphagnum moss, I should say, I think it's coming back to life in some spots. So I was hoping that it would, because that can kind of grow, mimic the natural environment of these plants, but also add like more of like a living element, make like a little world out of it. So this is my little carnivorous plant bog experiment. When I started kind of going down that path, I started checking out, there's like sundews and all these other kind of crazy things. So I was like, oh my goodness, this is what's going to happen. So I'm sure I can probably squeeze one or two more little things in here, but this thing's going to go outside in the summertime. I'm not feeding it. I don't do anything with it. It's going to do just fine. It'll feed itself. But yeah, definitely carnivorous plants are my new thing, my new interest, I guess, for this winter. I've been studying about them, watching videos on them, reading about them. Definitely into pitcher plants. And of course, the Venus flytrap. Honestly, it's not that interesting to me, but it's kind of like the ubiquitous, plant. And if you have kids, they kind of like it. And if you can kind of maybe catch a fly or something and let the trap kind of close on it, get your kids into plants, kind of showing that, that's something pretty cool to kind of get kids into nature and things like that. So that'll go ahead and wrap up the indoor plant tour for right now. Hope you guys liked it. If you did, leave a comment down below of what you're growing inside to keep you sane this winter. 2020 is almost over, so starting in just a couple weeks, 2021, turning the page. What are you doing new in 2021? You know, I have new videos can be coming up pretty soon. I'm going to answer, I made a Q&A video where I asked you the questions and you asked me the questions, etc. I will answer the questions and talk about what I'm going to do in 2021. So if you haven't, I'll put a link up here to show you. There you go. You can watch that right there. My question and answer. And it's the last chance you guys will have to respond or add more comments to that, because once it's give it a couple more days after this video is posted up, I'll go ahead and stop taking the comments and make the get the best of, if you will, and answer the questions after that. So thanks for hanging out with me, guys, here on the hillside, checking out the plants on the inside. Hopefully it's spring comes soon and we don't all go crazy sitting inside. We'll catch you next time, guys, up here on the hillside.